Hello everyone, and welcome to another army build video. For those of you who have been watching my content, my previous army builds, you know how much I love stacking my melee buffs to overwhelm my opponents in sheer troop quality with those buffs stacking. And this Wood Elf army right here is the build that started it all. There will be two replays in this army build video, as I will be using each replay to show a different style of buff stacking and Wood Elf rushing army build. Now, Wood Elves mostly are known for their abilities to shoot to skirmish. They have great skirmishers, Weight Watchers, great armor-piercing fire. We have the Deepwood Scouts, less expensive and less AP, but still an excellent skirmish unit. And we have the Glade Riders, just good all-round skirmishing cavalry that can double as a melee cavalry. But yet, it's been months since I actually fielded some Weight Watchers in battle, because every damn time I play Wood Elves, I just deployed a rush army and just overwhelm my opponent without any care of protecting skirmishers, because who else can catch Glade Riders if they do not actually have a net or something? And in this battle, we are facing off Bowmore, a skillful tournament player. It will be an intense battle of back and forth. We are trying to use our mobility to isolate and overwhelm our opponent's forces and try to gain the upper hand. Now, for the actual army builds, for our Wood Elf army, the green Wood Elves here, we have a front line of Dryads. Some of them are chevroned up due to some leftover funds. At the back, we have our mobility. 2 Glade Riders with spear, 1 on each flank, as well as 2 Glade Riders with hackbane tips. We have 2 Wild Riders with shields on the left flank, attempting to do a flank overload, but as you can see here, they are already caught in combat by some Vanguard Dryads. As for the center core, we have some elite melee infantries. Wardens of Sifro, a regiment of renowned Wildwood Rangers with that Azrai spear and that shield. They have much better attack and defense stats than their regular counterparts. For leadership, we have Glade Captain with all her melee buffs, as well as Branch Wraith with Call of the Woods, as well as some healing. Draca leading the army with her summons and some shadow magic, including Enfeebling Foe. For my opponent's army, Bowmore's army, we have a left flank of a lot of Glade Riders and Wild Riders. Actually, 2 Wild Riders, 2 Glade Riders. At the back, some War Dancers with Azrai Spears. In the front line, for deployed, we have a bunch of Dryads as the bulk of the infantry forces. We have more Glade Riders over here and more Wild Riders. And also the Regiment of Renowned Wild Hunters of Kurnos, with magic and anti-large attacks. We are basically going for a similar kind of line of thought here, trying to deploy forward with infantry rush, also with an aggressive mobility push, without any skirmishers as well, so that we don't have any weaknesses for our opponents to exploit. However, we did deviate on the quality and quantity of mobility we deployed. As Bowmore here, he went all in on the Wild Riders unit, actually getting 4 units of Wild Riders, 1 of them without a shield if I remember correctly. Yep, right here. And the more expensive anti-large version Wild Hunters of Kurnos with magic attacks. And I instead chose to bring a couple skirmishing cavalry. With the army builds over, let's just get the battle started and get the action going. The battle begins with quite a bit of action, as we have the Wild Riders here surrounded by Dryads, Draca, and a rear charge from the Wild Riders. My friendly Wild Riders are taking a lot of damage. Now, already breaking, a friendly green Wild Riders come in with a supporting charge, trying to do whatever damage they can for a sneaky blow on these Dryads and swiftly pull out. While over here, with all the resources I dumped into this one single red Dryad unit, the Glade Riders and a single Dryad unit as well, the Wild Hunters of Kurnos trying to support the engagement, but with so many Dryads overwhelming this position, they are wisely pulling out. While the Glade Riders with hackbane tips are showering my opponent with the magic missile fire, ignoring that physical resistance on these Azrai Spears as they are facing off the magic attacks of the Dryads. So, being a very squishy unit with no armor and only relying on that physical resistance and high melee defense, they are taking quite a bit of damage from the magic attacks and high attack from the Dryads. Although Bowmore here did have an excellent catch with the Pit of Shades here, using that magic to lock my unit in place, allowing these Glade Riders to go for a supporting charge. While over here, we have a pretty decent engagement as we slow down a bit, and we have the Malevolent Dryads here being summoned right behind some Wild Riders who went balls deep into the engagement, but now being trapped by a bunch of anti-large infantry wardens of Cithro, and the malevolent dryads, they are not being able to pull out, and now subject to the might of the characters here, being beat down to 1/3 of their health, while the rest of the dryads are actually being blended by the wardens of Cithro. With 69 attack, very nice, and 50 melee defense, they're actually juiced up by 2 separate characters' auras. With the Call of the Woods coming from the Branch Wraith, as well as the Horn of Isha and Dance of Loic coming from the Glade Captain, they are receiving a constant +10 melee attack and +5 melee defense, ramping up their stats and allowing them to trade extremely cost efficiently against the Dryads, as the attack of the Dryads are not landing. With only 33 attack against that 50 defense of the Wardens of Cithro, 69 attack is just easily shredding through the low defense of the Dryad units. Of course, that's also partly thanks to their Regiment of Renown status giving them full chevrons. In addition, their decent armor is absolutely screwed from the armor sundering of these Wardens of Cithro. Normally they have 60 armor baseline, which is pretty decent, actually better than something, let's say, a Tomb Guard. With armor sundering down to 30 and armor piercing attacks from the Wardens of Cithro, the Wardens are gonna have veggie shish kebab for dinner tonight. Now over here we have a lot of mobility of my opponent here, Bowmore, just bouncing around with the cavalry. They're breaking the Dryad unit who was defeating the War Dancers earlier, but with more Dryads rushing in, they will have a hard time cutting through that 60 armor. While over here, one Dryad unit holding back a Dryad and also some Glade Riders that I basically forgotten about and just kept them there. On the far end, some of my surviving Wild Riders with shields are actually able to extract themselves from a malevolent Dryad and now charging straight into some other red Dryads. With some nearby infantry support, they should hold out fine against the opposing Dryads. More friendly Dryads, green Dryads, just trying to fend off these red Glade Riders with spears, while the Hackbane tips are providing the fire support. Bogged down in aggressive infantry and showered by arrow fire, these Glade Riders are not long for this world. Back to the melee grind in the center, still having 71 models left on the Wardens of Cithro, their health sustained by the occasional Earthblood, and already up to 57 kills, breaking 2 Dryad units away. Bowmore's Striker is in danger as Enfeebling Foe, upgraded version, -24 defense and attack on Dryka. Now she is subjected to the might of 3 characters beat down. With the magic attacks from the Branch Wraith and Dryka, Bowmore's Red Dryka is getting shredded by the characters and the surrounding infantry, as she is under a prolonged stat debuff, being overpowered by her opponents. Not even the Red Dryads are able to save her, as they are now breaking from the sheer martial prowess of the Wardens of Cithro. Over here, some malevolent Dryads are engaging some more Dryads. It's just a lot of tree-on-tree action here. While over here, the Wild Riders who are fleeing from the Red Wild Riders, a very healthy unit, are just getting charged down by the pursuing Glade Riders with spears, while my opponents still have a lot of mobility intact here. Although the balance of power is a bit in my favor, as Dryka, the Red Dryka is severely weakened from all the gooning attempts from the character squads. Remember, all these characters are also enjoying that +10 melee attack and +5 melee defense, so they do have superior combat stats, especially with the support of the Wardens. Now for an overview of the battlefield. My opponent just trying to use his mobility advantage here to run down the green Dryad units. However, Dryads are not exactly that fragile against a Wild Rider charge or a Glade Rider charge, as they do have at least 60 armor baseline, so they can ignore quite a bit of damage from that lancing charge. While I still have a lot of anti-large capabilities, so if they actually charge into the blob, they will be shut down pretty hard by the spears and shields, while my Glade Captain is just chipping away the models of the Wild Hunters of Kernus with her bow fire, although the trees did help out the Reindeer Cavalry a bit and blocking off the shots. A heal going down on these Wild Riders, trying to top up, sustain their health a little bit so they can fight a little bit longer, as my Glade Rider units are able to survive with their skirmishing mode, which is why I prefer them over regular foot archers, because they requires less babysitting. These Glade Riders barely surviving with their high speed, and now just chipping away the health of the Wild Hunters. A Pit of Shades goes down right there by Bowmore, trying to attempt to catch my units again, but this time I actually managed to dodge it. So a waste of magic, while the Wild Riders here trying to break whatever units they can, but Dryad still. 60 armor and physical resistance, the Wild Riders are not doing that much damage, and now with the returning attacks from the Dryads with magic properties, the physical resistance of the Wild Riders are actually ignored, and actually against Dryads whose melee attack is higher than the melee defense of the Riders. The Wild Riders are taking some noticeable damage from this engagement despite getting the rear charge, as the magic attacks of the Dryads render their physical resistance useless. Over here, more Dryads that return are broken off by the Wardens of Cithro, already up to 144 kills, all those kills coming from Wild Riders and Dryads, so all that is just solid value. And now is a converging charge from our opponent here. The Wild Riders, they are tattered, but they are still fighting. Glade Riders here also helping out. Over here, some Glade Riders with spears are getting peppered down by the missile fire from the Hackbane tips, and just getting slowly chipped away. Now the tattered green Wild Riders charging into the red Wild Riders who have the numbers advantage, but with character support, they're not actually losing that much. While the Wardens of Cithro here coming up for support, but they do have a low armor, so whenever getting charged by anything in the back, they will suffer quite a bit damage. Just like here, already down to 2/3 of health, still dropping just by a mere Glade Rider with spears charging. Although I now have the numbers advantage with the returning Hackbane tips overwhelming my opponent's position, Dryka gets beat down by my characters, and that's basically it for the game, as the characters are gone and now army losses is hit. This one very healthy Wild Riders who have been bouncing around trying to clean up enemy units is also routing. Okay, let's be quick with the army performances, as we do have another replay to showcase. For the green Wood Elves here, we have the Dryads doing really solid work here. This one getting over 1,200 value. No doubt beating down a bunch of Wild Riders and maybe shredded through some war dances. Not as much value for the rest of the guys, but they still basically earn back their worth. Wardens of Cithro as well, carrying the game with 1,400 value, supported by the heroic units shredding their way through a bunch of Dryads, basically blending through trees with spears and shield. Glade Riders here, not really earning back too much value as they get overwhelmed by the superior mobility of my opponents. Wild Riders as well, this one caught by surprise in the beginning and just get overwhelmed. The other one actually fared a slightly better engagement, as they were able to survive in the end, get some healing and do some rear charging and whatnot. Glade Riders here always able to pull their weight, this one earning back their value, this one did not. However, mostly just using that missile fire to pepper down their enemies and also drag enemies out of position as they force the Glade Riders to chase them down. Our heroic units here, they did okay. The Glade Captain essential in the blob fights, as her melee buffs are very useful in providing that stat buffs to the Wardens of Cithro, allowing them to maximize damage and minimize injury. Branch Wraith here just there for heals, but still beating down enemy Dryka did some pretty good value. Same for the friendly Dryka. However, the true potential of this unit has not been reached, as she does have this passive ability that allows her to provide massive attack buffs up to 15 if she is damaged enough. However, she has been quite healthy throughout the game, so she was not able to provide that massive buffs to friendly units nearby. Now for the red Wood Elves, we have Dryka here not getting a good engagement as she was surrounded by single entities and get beaten down. Same goes for the remaining Dryads here, most of them getting beaten down, especially fighting against the Wardens of Cithro, an elite unit with just superior stats and healing. They were just overpowered by sheer combat prowess. The War Dancers went straight into some Dryads, and their squishiness really do them no favor in this kind of engagement. Glade Riders here, this one getting actually 850 value, pretty impressive. While the other ones not exactly getting good engagements, as the Dryads really don't care about their rear charges with their 60 armor and pretty decent leadership. Now Wild Riders here, none of them getting back their value, as this Wild Rider was just chasing off routing units and bouncing across the battlefield, not able to find a decent engagement. However, I do say that it could have just went for a rear charge against the Wardens of Cithro, as with their squishiness, any rear charge from any unit, especially with Wild Riders, such a damaging light cavalry, they will get wrecked on a single rear charge, at least severely crippled and be less effective in fighting. Wild Riders with shields here, they were not able to fight decently, as the Dryads do have the magic attacks to cut through their physical resistance. Now that's basically it for this battle. Let's move on to the next one to showcase a different Wood Elf melee buff stacking. And now we are on the second battlefield, and this time we are the ones going all in on cavalry. In the front vanguard, we have a bunch of Glade Riders here. We also have a pretty bare-bone infantry line with only 5 Eternal Gods with shields. And deep in the forest, this is where our killing force will be. Our great stag knights, 2 units of these majestic stags with their giant antlers and beautifully carved armor, guarding their heroes. A Spellsinger of Life bringing in Regrowth, Earthblood, and Dwellers Below. And guarded by Glade Captain bringing in all her buffs as well, Dance of Loek and Horn of Isha, buffing melee troops by 5 melee attack and defense at the same time. Now, for the Lord, we have the Glade Lord, the melee variant, with the Banner of the Hunter King, and also Call of the Woods. Combined together, it gives surrounding units a plus 10 melee attack and plus 10% charge bonus. When you look at the stats of the surrounding Stag Knights, you can see they're all the way up to 58 melee attack at this point. And if we do a little bit of stats comparison to the Chaos Army, the Chaos Knights, they have 50 melee defense, which is pretty damn high. So against the baseline 43 melee attack of the Stag Knights, they can actually take a few hits. But now, with the Stag Knights exceeding their melee defense with a superior melee attack, these Chaos Knights will get hit consistently by the Stag Knights, and their melee defense will be insufficient to protect them from the ravaging of the armor-piercing melee attacks. Now for the rest of the Chaos builds, we have a line of Chaos Marauders, just a lot of numbers here, no doubt trying to push my skirmishing archers if I brought any. And at the back, a lot of Hounds and Chaos Knights, basically just using that shielded Chaos Knight and the speed of the Chaos Warhounds to overwhelm my positions. Well, that is if I brought a skirmishing army, and I totally did not bring so. So these mobility will have a hard time doing their job here. Against Stag Knights, the huge weapon strength and armor piercing as well, they will have quite a bit of trouble. While in the skies, double Manticore protecting a Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Metal. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's get the second battle rolling. Now this game was actually played on the Antiquity Ladder stream as well against Count League from Extreme Meme Team. He was telling me after the game that he was expecting me to bring a kite army with a bunch of foot archers, and that's why they have a lot of mobility on their end with Manticores, Hounds, and Chaos Knights with shields and swords that can tank out a bunch of missiles and chase down my foot archers, but I brought no such thing. Only 2 Stag Knights hidden in the forest, while the Glade Riders, swift on their steeds, who can easily outrun the Chaos mobility, are now shooting down these Chaos Marauders. And with their great weapons, they are getting shot to pieces by the missile fire, as the Glade Riders swiftly pulling back and chucking shots into their faces. Accompanied by all the Chaos flying monsters, Warhounds are all moving through the forest while my characters are chucking shots into the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, although the trees providing a bit cover, blocking the shots for them. My Stag Knights are still staying among the trees hidden from sight, so they can surprise with a countercharge against my enemy's units, while my leadership are pretty much spotted with all the firing and whatnot. Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Metal trying to dive down for a sneaky charge, but quickly pulled back, while the dogs, surprised by the Stag Knight's counter-attack from the trees, took a few casualties, nothing too substantial, but losing a few models on the charge. Over here for the infantry line, the Eternal Gods with shields will be engaging the Chaos Marauders, and they will be losing this engagement handily, as the Marauders are very cost efficient against any low armored spearmen troops. On the far flank, the Chaos mobility, the Hounds, the Chaos Knights, they're maneuvering, shifting towards the flank, attempting to go for an envelope, while the Stag Knights are just staying around the front line, trying to be in the position of countercharging whenever possible, while Glade Lord and the Glade Captain are just sitting around the front line, providing the Eternal Gods with a little bit of stats buff, ramping their melee attack up to 41 and melee defense to 49. To make the engagement a slightly bit more favorable, dogs now rushing into Eternal Gods, being countercharged by Great Stag Knights, the Thunderous Charge, breaking these Chaos Warhounds, while the Chaos Knights and Warhounds are charging into Great Stag Knights, getting debuffed by this crucial item on the Glade Lord, the Helm of Discord, an AoE enfeebling foe with no magic cost, debuffing their stats down to the 20s, and the Stag Knights with 58 attack, 35 defense, they are getting wrecked on the charge. Although the Chaos Sorcerer of Metal is retaliating with a final transmutation, catching a lot of the valuable units, while the Eternal Guards buckling under the might of multiple Chaos Knights. But still, with the character support and the Overcast Earthblood mitigating some damage from the final transmutation, the Great Stag Knights are dishing massive damage, already ruining one Chaos Knight along with the rest of the Warhounds. And now the Chaos Sorcerer Lord and the Manticores are diving down into combat, trying to even things a bit, already sniping out the Spell Singer, while the Glade Lord taking massive damage as well. With an overview over the infantry line, you can see the Eternal Guards have already buckled under the sheer numbers of Chaos Marauders, so everything comes down to this messy brawl, where the Chaos Sorcerer of Metal is bogged down in a bunch of Eternal Guards, Glade Captains fighting valiantly. Glade Lord is terrified, but the buffs are still on, with the Glade Captain here fighting in the midst of the combat. She is on the Great Stags, and she also have anti-large, so she excels in fighting all these monsters and cavalry. Some Glade Riders returning from kiting now charging into combat, putting their lives on the line to save their Glade Lord, who is being surrounded by multiple single entity monsters, his health reaching a critical level. Fortunately for the Wood Elves, despite losing their healing early, the second unit of Stag Knights are still very healthy, as they are not hit by any damage spells, and they are now able to deliver some devastating charges. Over here, Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Metal trying to hunt down the Glade Lord, and is quite successful in that regard. But now with the Great Stag Knights who have regrouped and charged in, counter-charging, trapping this Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Metal in the fray, dishing out massive charge damage with the armor-piercing attacks. Eternal Guards rushing in to protect their liege, and now the Chaos Sorcerer on his dragon and also the two Manticores are taking massive damage, even rampaging the Manticores. And with a second unit of Stag Knights very healthy charging into the fray, the Sorcerer Lord is forced to abandon his Manticores and flee to the skies. And with the Chaos Sorcerer back into the skies, the Glade Lord and Glade Captain are able to hang back, pull out their bows and arrows, and begin their target practice. Some Glade Riders are still roaming around, hunting down the routing Marauders, and the Glade Lord, being tattered as he is, still able to support the fights with the Helm of Discord here, debuffing the Chaos Feral Manticore, allowing the engagement to go slightly better for my Stag Knights and Eternal Guards. The Chaos Sorcerer Lord diving down into combat, also debuffed by the Helm of Discord, while the rest of the mobility are too far for support. That leaves the leadership of the Chaos in a very precarious situation, surrounded by enemy units all armor piercing and some of them anti-large. Chaos Sorcerer, not exactly the best combat character, only 46 attack and 45 defense. He is destroyed by these surround of very healthy Stag Knights. Chaos Marauders, Knights, even Manticores pouring in trying to save their lord. But the Chaos Sorcerer Lord is fleeing in the wrong direction, being chased off by the Great Stag Knights led by the Glade Captain with her very own majestic mount. The Sorcerer Lord is shattered by these backbreaking charges. The rest of the Chaos units are also wavering. A charge from the Glade Riders here engaging in melee combat to deliver an additional rear charge and quickly break away this pocket of Chaos troops, turning the tide decisively against Chaos, and the Tree Huggers of FL Laurel shall prevail once more. Now on the post-battle screen, let's have a look at the army performances. For the Wood Elf army, the Glade Lord almost died there. Only a sliver of HP is left, but with all that stat buffs and also Helm of Discord, he provided a crucial support to the army, allowing the Stag Knights to dish out the damage with that stat buffs, giving them plus 15 attack with the combination of Glade Captain's buffs as well as the Glade Lords. And you can see here the Great Stag Knights, the healthy one, 2200 value, the more damaged one, 1800 value, and 2 chevrons on each of them. That's some really impressive damage. Heavy lifting, carry the day, and that is without help support, as my Spell Singer of Life was lost in melee combat earlier due to the sniping goon squads. The infantry here, the Eternal Guards, didn't really do much as they were destroyed by the ravaging Marauders. Glade Riders, they did okay, didn't really earn back their value, but they basically pulled their weight there and did some key charges to screen out for the Glade Lord, body blocking so that the Glade Lord could have survived a little longer, using that Helm of Discord to keep these Chaos troops in the equivalent state of wet noodles in terms of melee stats. And in addition, the Glade Captain did alright as well, with the armor-piercing anti-large melee attacks and also the ammo on their bow fire, just chipping away the HP of the flying units when they're out of reach in the skies. Now for the Chaos Army, the Marauders did alright. However, their leadership couldn't hold up after the Chaos Sorcerer Lord got routed and shattered, especially with the fear effects from the Stag Knights. Although the Lord did do 4,600 damage, that's some ridiculous stuff, and also there's no healing to mitigate that damage, so all that mostly have some solid effects on my units, as the Final Transmutation drained away the health of my key leadership and the Great Stag Knights as well. In addition, the Chaos Sorcerer was consistently bombarding my formations with the Searing Doom. I didn't really highlight it, but it was constantly dropped onto my cavalry units, destroying some of my Glade Riders and also doing some big damage to the Great Stag Knights. However, the mobility of the Chaos wasn't able to do too much here. This one get 1000 value with some decent charges, but this one I assume that is the one that got destroyed on the initial charge, being hammered by Stag Knights and also the Helm of Discord. Warhounds didn't really do too much here, as there are no suitable targets for them to swarm. Maybe they could have pressured the Glade Riders, but they would just be kited to death, and engaging in melee against Eternal Gods and Stag Knights, they were way out of their league here. For Manticore, their main purpose was supposed to be pressuring the skirmishing units, the foot archers of the Wood Elves, but since I do not have any foot archers, their main purpose switched over to sniping out characters. They did snipe out the live Spellsinger, however, after doing some big damage to my Glade Lord, they got overrun and swarmed by the Great Stag Knights. So not the greatest combat performance for this feral beast. And yeah, that's how you play the Wood Elves without a single foot archer in your army against multiple matchups. A big thanks to Count League for playing against me in the stream. It was a really fun game. I would go on a slight bit of tangent here. I'm a big fan of the Wood Elf aesthetics, the infantry, the Eternal Gods, the War Dancers, Wildwood Rangers, the cavalry as well. Wild Riders looked absolutely majestic. I really like how they designed the carving on the shields, the fantastic designs of the weapons, the Azrai spears. However, I absolutely suck at kiting and micro. I had a hard time protecting my foot archers from all the skirmish cavalry, the hounds, the light cav and whatnot. So I tried to figure out how to play Wood Elves without kiting, and this is it. This is the result, with a bunch of buffs to ramp up your stats on your troops and allow them to overpower their opponents in a straight up melee fight. And this is why I like Total War Warhammer so much, because for the same army, if you put a bit thought into it, you can turn it into a whole separate playstyle different from the mainstream, and it still works. Of course, I will still probably have to get better with microing, especially with skirmish cavalry and skirmish archers, but that's going to be another issue for another time. Right now, to sum up, this is a Wood Elf rush build without a single foot archer. It is fast, it is aggressive, it gives your troops an edge in a straight up melee fight against your opponents. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to get notified every time I upload a new video. I'll be uploading more videos, including wild builds like this one, or just general battle replays, and sometimes tips on multiplayer like strategies and tactics. And if you have any units or playstyles you want me to try out and experiment with, feel free to drop a comment down below and give me a suggestion. I'll be sure to check it out and see what can I do with it. And if you have any replays that you want to showcase, feel free to drop by my Discord and send in a replay file, or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check it out as well. And that's basically it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.